Speaking of trade, the European Union is on the brink of a trade war with China, and the stakes could not be higher. China is the second largest economy in the world. The EU is the third largest. A trade war between them could be disastrous. So what is the flashpoint? Electric cars, or EVs, electric vehicles. Europe says China is flooding their market with cheap electric vehicles. How? By giving subsidies. As a result, European firms cannot keep up. They're losing sales and market share to China. Brussels is looking to correct this. On Wednesday, the EU chief announced an investigation into Chinese EVs. Listen to this.
Global markets are now flooded with cheaper Chinese electric cars. And their price is kept artificially low by huge state subsidies. This is distorting our market. And as we do not accept this distortion from the inside in our market, we do not accept this from the outside. So I can announce today that the Commission is launching an anti-subsidy investigation into electric vehicles coming from China.
It's a huge announcement, and I'll give you two reasons why. Number one, the European industry did not complain. So the decision to investigate China came from Brussels, not companies, not industry executives. And reason number two, this could snowball into a trade war. If the findings are negative, the findings of this investigation, if they're negative, Brussels could impose more tax on Chinese EVs. Of course, China will respond in kind. You could very well have a tariff war between China and the European Union. Beijing has slammed this anti-subsidy investigation. They're calling it protectionism.
What I want to emphasize is that the investigation measure that the European Union plans to take is to protect its own industry in the name of fair competition. This is blatant protectionist behavior that will seriously disrupt and distort the global automotive industrial chain and supply chain, including the European Union.
So what's the full story here? China is the largest EV producer in the world. They make up 8% of all electric vehicles sold in Europe. It could reach 15%, 1-5, by 2025, 15%. What explains this trend? Europe is known for its top-class auto industry. So why are Europeans buying from China? Because the EVs are cheaper. Around 20% less expensive than EVs made in Europe. Chinese cars are 20% cheaper. And that is a big difference. Brussels is investigating how that difference is possible. China says it's technology and skill. But the European Union is not convinced. They think it has to do with state subsidies like tax cuts or cheap land or low raw material prices. The investigation will take around 13 months. If China has tinkered with the market, then there will be tariffs. Right now, the EU imposes a 10% tax on Chinese electric vehicles. The US imposes around 27%. So Europe does have some wiggle room. But is there merit to their claim? Local authorities in China still offer subsidies to EV makers. In fact, Beijing was warned about this. Let me introduce you to NIO, a Chinese automaker based in Shanghai. The founder of NIO sounded the alarm back in April. He said Chinese EV makers should brace for the possibility of tariffs. He also explained why. Apparently, Chinese EV makers have a cost advantage. Take battery prices, for example. In China, that's around $130 per kilowatt hour. Outside China, it's $151 or thereabouts. Beijing has been pumping in subsidies to prop up this sector. In 6 years, they have spent $57 billion, and this helps all car makers, in fact. Both Chinese ones like BYD and foreign makers like Tesla who run their factories out of China. But the end beneficiary is Beijing. So there is merit to Europe's claim. Yet two questions remain. Number one, why haven't European companies complained about this? Because they're scared of China. A German auto association says the EU must be mindful of a backlash from Beijing. So they want the EU to focus on other things, like lowering electricity prices or reducing government hurdles. Basically, they're telling the EU, do not pick a fight. And the reason is quite simple. China is a huge market for European cars, for European car makers. They don't want to risk a trade war. And question number two, if the companies are not complaining, why is the European Union complaining? Because of jobs. Europe's auto industry employs 13 million people. That's 7% of all European jobs in the auto industry. Now imagine European automakers cannot compete with China. What will they do? As they say, if you can't beat them, you join them. So European companies could end up shifting base to China, and Brussels is trying to avoid that to ensure that the automakers and the jobs stay within Europe. That's the financial side of things. But you can't ignore the politics. China's support for Russia has ruffled a lot of feathers in Brussels. Most European nations see Beijing as a threat now. In that context, this investigation is not a surprise. It's just a natural course of action. But the bigger worry is this. Bigger economies are embracing protectionism. Like America, last year Joe Biden passed the Inflation Reduction Act. It calls for massive EV subsidies. If you buy certain electric vehicles, you get tax breaks worth more than $7,500. Just one condition: the EV must be made in North America. That's the US, Mexico, and Canada. The European Union criticized that decision as well. They called it discriminatory. So EVs promise to be political lightning rods in the future. Many believe it's the future of the auto industry. And if that is the case, every country will try to capitalize. Countries like Japan and Germany have built their economies around fuel cars. EVs could offer a similar opportunity. We talk about politics every night on the show. Some of those events and stories are so bizarre, they seem otherworldly. But this one in Mexico truly takes the cake. The Mexican Congress held a hearing, their first hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, aka UFOs. They were talking about aliens. And they put 2 corpses on display. According to them, these were alien corpses with elongated heads and 3 fingers on each hand. Now, if you've grown up watching movies like E.T., these corpses may look very familiar to you. They look exactly like the aliens shown in movies. So did Hollywood get it right? Is it time for a meet and greet with our otherworldly neighbors? Our next report tells you all about Mexico's extraterrestrial extravaganza.
What do you think the politicians of a country discuss, especially in parliament? Well, you'd expect things like policies, healthcare, even education. But Mexico's Congress seems to have taken a break from national issues to dive headfirst into the paranormal. Mexico's Congress gathered to discuss the ever-elusive topic of UFOs. But quickly, one thing became apparent. This wasn't your average committee meeting. The star attraction? Alien corpses. Yes, you heard that right. Bodies of extraterrestrial guests were put on display, all for the world to see.
This is the first time this evidence presented during the hearing is presented in such a form, and I think there is a clear demonstration that we are dealing with non-human specimens that are not related to any other species in our world, and that any scientific institution can investigate it.
Does that mean aliens are real? Well, let's not jump to conclusions just yet. This could just be a case of mistaken identity. I mean, take the corpses, for example. They have elongated heads, 3 fingers in each hand. At first glance, they're very similar to aliens that you see in movies. The bodies were allegedly found in Peru in 2017, and according to Mexico, they're about 1,000 years old. The aliens were displayed by this man, Jaime Maussan. He's a self-proclaimed UFOologist and journalist. His theories have been debunked before, but he clearly doesn't give up. And while the aliens landed in the Congress, there were no saucer-shaped UFOs hovering over the building, or even any bright green invaders. Either way, the session was an unprecedented one. It took place 2 months after a similar one before the US Congress. Both sides debated whether aliens were real, but Mexico seems to have taken it one step further. It brought evidence and how. Which brings us to the question, are aliens real? Well, scientists have already debunked these claims. They call it a fraud. The Congress, too, hasn't taken a position on the issue. They're just listening to evidence. So, while aliens may not be real, this session certainly delivers on entertainment value. Mexico's Congress has successfully blended politics with sci-fi and humor. But it leaves many with one burning question. Are we alone in the universe? And if we're not, why have aliens ditched their favorite destination, America, for for its southern neighbor. Is Mexico now their new favorite country? Well, who knows? Maybe like all of us, aliens also prefer tacos, tequila, and abortion rights.
Slay, serve, survive. Lukewarm regards. Hasta la pasta. No, I'm not glitching. I'm simply sharing email sign-offs written by the young workers of today. For most of the world, Gen Z speak may as well be parcel tongue. You know, the language of serpents from Harry Potter, parcel tongue. Gen Z seem to have a language of their own, which not only transforms one day and one reel at a time, but it is killing off the good old OG work buzzwords. A new Barclays survey is out. It says 71% workers believe the young are changing the language of the workplace. 41% say yours truly is dying. 36% say yours sincerely has been given a death sentence. Now, when a bank says that formal corporate lingo is dying, you know that something is up. Here's a report.
To whom it may concern, RIP. No, this isn't meant for you. We're speaking to the formal work phrase, to whom it may concern. It seems to be dying a slow death, and young workers would rather give up on a day of TikTok than resuscitate it, because they have said hasta la pasta to traditional email phrases. Instead, they write jargon like all right, or slay, serve, survive. Some don't even expend that much creative energy. They'd rather be direct, so they write lukewarm regards. Please hesitate to reach out. Or, if you have any questions, please ask someone else. It's brutal for sure, but the trend is taking over. It's happening, people. Formalities in workplace language are due for retirement. And a bank says so. A bank. What are we talking about? Friends, Romans and boomers, lend us your ears. A new survey is out. It was conducted by Barclays. It says 3/4 of workers believe Gen Z is changing language in the workplace. They say commonly used expressions at work could be lost from offices within a decade. Which words are the worst hit? Take your pick. 41% of people say yours truly is dying. 36% claim yours sincerely is reaching its end. 35% say to whom it may concern has been given a death sentence. Terms like with compliments and respects are bidding goodbye too. Question is, why is this happening? Obviously, the answer has everything to do with Gen Z. More and more youngsters are joining the workforce. According to the World Economic Forum, by 2025, Gen Z will account for 1/3 of the workforce, meaning the way they communicate affects corporate jargon. Reports say employees aged between 18 and 24 are twice as likely to use instant messaging compared to the older generations, especially the 50+, and texting by its very nature is more casual. This has a spillover effect for emails. So old-fashioned phrases have become a casualty to this casualness. Young workers also have a greater desire to show their personality during workplace exchanges, like email messaging. Think about emojis or GIFs. That's what colleagues often use while chatting with each other. And what better way to incorporate fun into emails than infuse it with email sign-offs? Of course, this doesn't work for everyone. Not all email receivers want to stay real or keep it groovy. So for them, maybe it's good to take a look at the bigger picture. Creative email sign-offs are a sign of the times. It also relieves you from crippling fear of finding the right words. Should an email end with best regards or thanks or yours truly? Should it begin with dear or hey? People are free to make the choice. Yours truly, Firstpost. Wait, scratch that. Firstpost out.